When the conscious mind surrenders to sleep, when your eyes close and the body begins to drift into stillness, there's a subtle but powerful truth most people miss entirely. Your subconscious mind does not sleep. It remains alert, active, and receptive. You may not be aware of it, but it's working, sorting through the noise of your day, drawing connections, storing impressions, and filtering reality through the lens you've constructed over a lifetime. This silent processor, this unseen architect of perception, never turns off. It's always listening. Unlike the conscious mind, which deals in logic, analysis, and immediate reaction, the subconscious speaks a different language. It thrives in symbols, in emotion, in rhythm and pattern. While you lie in bed at night thinking the day is over, your subconscious is still playing back the moments you barely noticed, a passing comment, a fleeting insecurity, a tiny triumph. It captures these fragments and embeds them into the internal blueprint that governs how you think, how you feel, and ultimately how you live. This is why what you feed your mind before sleep matters more than you realize. The last thoughts you entertain, the emotions you carry into sleep, the unresolved tensions you ignore, these don't disappear with the night. They are handed over to the subconscious, and they become part of your internal reality. The mind, in this regard, is not a machine that powers down. It's a garden, and every night is a season of planting. Most people treat sleep as a shutdown, but it's more accurate to think of it as a shift in consciousness. You move from one mode of awareness to another, from deliberate thought to passive absorption. But even in this passive state, the mind is building. That voice in the back of your head, the one you barely register during the day, becomes more audible at night. And what it whispers depends on what you've been feeding it. Think about that. If your days are filled with stress, anger, self-doubt, and distraction, and you carry those unresolved emotions into sleep, you're essentially handing those raw materials to your subconscious and saying, "Here, build with this," and it will. It will reinforce those patterns in your dreams, in your memory consolidation, in your emotional associations. You'll wake up the next day subtly altered, not by some external event, but by the quiet work your subconscious performed while you were unaware. But the inverse is also true. If you intentionally feed your mind something different before sleep, something empowering, something reflective, something true, you can begin to rewire the internal circuitry. It's not magic, it's neuroplasticity, it's repetition, it's focus, and it's available to anyone willing to treat their inner life as seriously as they treat the outer one. There's an old saying, as above, so below, as within, so without. And in the case of the subconscious, we might say, as you sleep, so you become. Let that thought settle in. The night is not a break from your growth. It is your most underutilized opportunity. Treat your sleep not just as recovery, but as preparation for a better mind, a clearer purpose, and a stronger life. Repetition is the language of the subconscious. It doesn't reason the way your conscious mind does. It doesn't argue, compare, or weigh options like a judge. It accepts, it absorbs, and more than anything else, it responds to what it sees and hears most often. This is why repeated thoughts, even unintentional ones, become beliefs, and beliefs over time become your reality. It's a humbling idea, really, that the words you say to yourself on repeat are scripting your inner world. Whether you're aware of it or not, your mind is always listening. Tell it often enough that you're not good enough, and it will begin to agree. Tell it you're unlucky, unworthy, or incapable, and it will shape your behavior to match that story, not because it's true, but because it's been reinforced. This isn't optimism or wishful thinking. This is cognitive conditioning. In psychology, we understand that repeated thoughts become neural pathways. These pathways, like trails in a forest, become easier to follow the more often they're walked. Eventually, they become the default routes your mind takes when interpreting experience. That's how anxiety becomes automatic. That's how self-doubt becomes reflexive. Not because these emotions are inherent, but because they've been rehearsed unconsciously over and over again. And yet, repetition can work in your favor just as powerfully. The same mechanism that locks in limitation can be used to install strength. This is where intentional repetition comes in conscious affirmation, visualization, and reflection. When practiced consistently, these tools don't just make you feel good in the moment, they begin to reshape how your subconscious evaluates the world, and it happens quietly, often without fanfare. That's why the period before sleep is so crucial. In those final moments, the boundary between your conscious and subconscious mind thins. The critical faculty, your inner skeptic, relaxes. This is your chance to plant something new, not with force, but with persistence. A gentle, consistent, emotionally charged repetition. If you tell yourself just before sleep that you are capable, if you visualize yourself moving through challenges with clarity, if you dwell for even 2 minutes on a vivid image of the person you're becoming, something begins to shift. The subconscious doesn't care if it's real. It doesn't wait for external validation. It simply accepts the repeated message and begins to filter your perception to match. And the beauty of this process is its simplicity. You don't need a breakthrough. You need consistency. You don't need the perfect words. You need the right ones, repeated often enough that they become more familiar than your fear. So many of us underestimate the power of the familiar. But the familiar is what the subconscious trusts, and if you're not choosing what becomes familiar, the world will choose for you through noise, through media, through voices that do not have your best interest at heart. The mind at its deepest level is always learning. The question is, what are you teaching it night after night? You don't need to control every thought. You just need to decide which ones are worth repeating. There's a curious phenomenon that happens in the space between waking and sleeping, a narrowing of attention, a softening of defenses. In that subtle transition, your conscious mind begins to loosen its grip. The analytical part of you, the one that's constantly judging, measuring, and problem-solving, begins to step aside, and what remains is something more impressionable, more sensitive to suggestion, the subconscious mind, wide open and listening. This is why the final thoughts you entertain before sleep are so potent. They don't just drift off into the void. They linger. They soak into the fertile soil of your subconscious, where they take root. It's here, in this twilight state, that the beliefs you reinforce have the greatest chance of becoming embedded. That's not poetry, it's neuropsychology. The brain, in this state, enters what's called the hypnagogic phase, a natural trance-like condition where suggestion bypasses resistance. You're not quite dreaming, not fully conscious, but deeply receptive. And this matters because whatever you repeatedly plant during this phase begins to form the internal scaffolding of your reality. Your final thought at night, the one you allow to settle as you drift into unconsciousness, becomes the first blueprint your mind starts working from the next morning. It's not about superstition, it's about mental programming. That last thought has staying power. It colors your dreams, your mood upon waking, and often the emotional tone of your entire day. Think about what you're handing to your subconscious in those final 5 minutes before sleep. Are you replaying worries? Are you revisiting arguments, regrets, comparisons? Or are you choosing something different, something strengthening, something intentional? because one will bind you to the past, and the other will quietly reshape your future. There's a deeper philosophical thread here too. Every night you are offered a miniature death, the end of one conscious cycle, and with it the opportunity for a quiet rebirth. Sleep is not simply rest, it's a return to the womb of the mind. It's your chance to rewrite the script, but most people hand over that opportunity to randomness, to fear, to leftover mental debris. You don't have to. You can use that sacred window to anchor a new thought, a new direction. And you don't need grand declarations. A single sentence will do. A single mental image repeated with conviction can do more than hours of scattered thinking during the day. I am enough. I trust myself. Tomorrow I move forward. These are not affirmations in the shallow, performative sense. They are statements of identity. When whispered to the subconscious in its most receptive state, they begin to influence what you believe is possible. The truth is, most people aren't suffering from a lack of effort. They're suffering from a lack of alignment. They're working hard in the light while sabotaging themselves in the dark. But you can change that simply by choosing your final thought more deliberately. So tonight, as the world quiets and your conscious mind begins to fade, ask yourself one simple question. Asterisk, what thought is worthy of becoming the foundation of my tomorrow? Asterisk, choose wisely. The mind remembers. Sleep has been misunderstood for far too long. We treat it as an escape, a break, a biological necessity that simply resets the body. And while that's partly true, it misses the deeper function. Sleep is not just a form of recovery. It is a gateway to transformation. It's not just the end of the day. It's the beginning of something unseen but powerful. The mind doesn't go dormant. It shifts gears. It moves inward. It begins the silent, unseen labor of integrating your thoughts, your emotions, your memories, and your beliefs. And it does so without your conscious interference. This is the paradox. Real change often doesn't happen when you're trying. It happens when you let go. During the day, we're immersed in control, decisions, responsibilities, reactions, endless noise. But at night, the need for control drops away, and in that surrender, the subconscious takes over. That's when the deep work begins, not the loud, effortful kind, but the quiet restructuring of the inner world. While you sleep, your brain doesn't just rest, it reorganizes. It consolidates memory, processes emotion, searches for patterns, and strengthens neural pathways based on what you've been feeding it. The content of your days becomes the architecture of your nights. That's why the thoughts you dwell on, the emotional tone you carry into sleep, and the stories you repeat to yourself before closing your eyes matter profoundly. They don't vanish in the night. They are magnified. If you fall asleep anxious, that anxiety becomes woven into your dream cycles and emotional baseline. If you fall asleep filled with hope or clarity or focused intention, that becomes the raw material your mind builds with. This isn't abstract theory. It's rooted in neuroscience. The brain doesn't stop learning just because you're unconscious. It learns differently, more intuitively, more associatively. It starts connecting dots your conscious mind missed. It rewires not just based on action, but on emotional frequency, and here's the powerful truth. You can participate in this process even while unconscious. You can influence what your subconscious focuses on during sleep. All it takes is a moment of deliberate intention, a few minutes of reflection, visualization, or affirmation before sleep can redirect the night's internal narrative. You can prime your mind to heal old patterns, reinforce new ones, and explore possibilities beyond the limits of your daily awareness. This is not fantasy. It's the natural intelligence of the human mind at work. an intelligence that becomes more accessible the less you resist it. Transformation doesn't always come from effort. Sometimes it comes from allowance. Sometimes the greatest shift happens not through action, but through alignment with who you are, who you're becoming, and what you choose to hold onto in the quietest moments of the night. So tonight, don't just fall asleep, enter it with intention. Use that doorway for something more than rest. Give your mind a mission, a question, an image of the life you are quietly building, because change doesn't begin with movement. It begins with meaning. What you believe deep down, beneath the surface, beneath the layers of intellect and performance, shapes how you move through the world. It dictates what you reach for, what you avoid, what you tolerate, and what you imagine is even possible for you. And most of these beliefs, they're not conscious. They live in the background, subtle, automatic, installed without your permission. This is the realm of the subconscious. During the day, you can manage appearances. You can think your way through decisions, adjust your behavior, even override certain instincts. But at night, in the absence of conscious control, the subconscious becomes the dominant force, and it doesn't work with logic, it works with belief. It reviews, it replays, and most importantly, it reinforces. And it does all this not based on what you wish were true, but on what you've already accepted as true. This is where dreams come in, not the metaphorical kind, but the literal ones. In your dreams, your subconscious begins to expose its architecture. The symbols it uses may seem bizarre or fragmented, but the emotional patterns are telling. If you constantly dream of being chased, trapped, falling, these are clues. Not of your future, but of your belief system, of what your subconscious is rehearsing, of what it still thinks is unresolved. The subconscious is not passive. It's highly adaptive, but it requires direction. And that direction comes not through force, but through repetition, emotion, and presence. You can't simply tell yourself a new belief once and expect it to overwrite decades of conditioning. You have to live with it, sit with it, rehearse it, especially when your mind is most open. At night, when your defenses are down and your inner world is malleable. Now here's the nuance that most people miss. Beliefs don't only affect how you think. They affect how you perceive. They literally filter your sensory data. Two people can walk through the same experience and come away with entirely different realities because their beliefs filtered the moment differently. The subconscious mind isn't just reacting. It's shaping what you see, what you remember, what you feel safe enough to pursue. So if you've been trying to change your life, but your internal belief system still whispers that you're not enough, or that success is for other people, or that change is dangerous, your subconscious will quietly sabotage your progress. Not maliciously, just predictably. It will try to maintain coherence between your beliefs and your experiences, even if those beliefs are outdated or limiting. But this is the invitation, to stop treating beliefs as fixed truths and start seeing them as malleable scripts. You wrote them once, through experience, through repetition, through exposure, and you can rewrite them the same way, especially in those liminal hours between waking and sleeping, because what you believe doesn't stay inside your head. It bleeds into your actions, it echoes in your tone, it governs your thresholds, what you accept, what you fight for, what you abandon. And every night without fail, your subconscious asks the same question. Asterisk, what do we still believe? Asterisk, make sure your answer is worthy of the life you want to live. One of the most fascinating and profoundly useful truths about the subconscious mind is that it does not distinguish between what is real and what is vividly imagined. This means that the images, emotions, and narratives you create in your mind have as much power to influence your internal world as your actual lived experiences. The subconscious, in its remarkable but straightforward way, accepts sensory input without judgment. If your mind perceives something as real, it treats it as real. This explains why visualization is such a potent tool for transformation. When you close your eyes and imagine a scene in rich detail, the way the light falls, the sounds, the feelings in your body, the subconscious begins to encode that as an experience. It rehearses it, laying down neural pathways as if you were actually walking that path. This isn't wishful thinking, it's a neurological fact. Your brain responds to imagined stimuli by activating many of the same regions that would fire if you were truly experiencing those moments. The emotional charge you attach to these visualizations matters deeply. The subconscious is drawn most strongly to feelings. If the mental images are vivid but cold, they carry less weight. But if they evoke real emotion, hope, excitement, peace, determination, they become powerful signals that can influence your beliefs, your expectations, and even your physiological responses. Your heart rate can shift. Your hormonal balance can be affected. The mind-body connection is inseparable. This is why what you rehearse in your mind before sleep is so critical. In that liminal state, where consciousness fades but receptivity peaks, you can feed your subconscious with positive, compelling stories. You're not just telling yourself what you want, you're showing it. The mind, unable to differentiate between real and imagined in this moment, takes the images you offer and integrates them into its ongoing work of shaping your identity. The philosophical implication here is profound. Reality, as you experience it, is in large part a construct of your mind. Your internal narrative colors everything you perceive. If you live trapped in the story of failure, fear, or limitation, your subconscious reinforces that framework night after night. But if you offer a different story, one of possibility, growth, and strength, your mind gradually adjusts your reality to fit that narrative. What many don't realize is that this process works quietly, often beneath conscious awareness. You don't need to force belief or willpower. Instead, by consistently engaging in emotionally rich visualization and affirmation, especially before sleep, you allow your subconscious to do the heavy lifting. It shifts your internal world gradually but profoundly. Imagine the potential. By guiding your imagination intentionally, you can reprogram the mind's deepest structures without resistance. You can create new habits, heal old wounds, and expand your sense of what is possible, all while you rest. So tonight, before you drift into sleep, consider what story you are telling yourself. What images are you painting in your mind's eye? Are they reflective of the life you desire? Or are they relics of the past you're holding on to? The subconscious mind listens carefully. It doesn't question. It simply believes. And in that belief lies your greatest power.